I love this work, and I think a lot of other actors or any artist listening to this will understand it, when you're doing it and you feel connected, not only to a story and a character, but also like your body's open. You are really hearing another person. You're connecting with another person through a made up scenario, but you feel genuinely connected to them. It's just, it's a strange, wonderful exercise of life.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Cory Michael Smith is an actor. He sat down with me on the Upper West Side of Manhattan to talk about the work.
I heard you say somewhere that, and this is a paraphrase, and I wish I went back because you said it so well. I should have. You said something like, mystery serves the actor's work much more than like information about the actor. You were saying this in context of how you don't really do a lot of interviews and talk about yourself.
Right.
And I think this also pertains maybe to the work. If you have this kind of worry about, which I think is a very good thing to worry about, and I agree with you. Mystery of you as a person is necessary for us to be kind of seduced by you as an actor.
Yeah.
So I want to say right off the bat, man, if there's anything that I'm asking you, and you're like, I can answer that, but I actually don't want to.
Okay.
Please do, because I
appreciate
care
that.
more about you and what you do to people like me and an audience than about this conversation.
I greatly appreciate that.
If this is going to affect that, I don't want you to talk about it.
Okay.
Is there a way that you typically start your preparation process, like when you get a new character? Is there a typical way that you kind of begin to wrap your arms around this new person that you play? Is there a first step?
I start with a colonic. I get rid of all past characters.
Yeah.
No, I do not start with a colonic, though it's maybe a good idea. But there are practical paths and there are intuitive paths with each character. And in many ways, early in the process, it feels very intuitive. And I feel really connected and I trust like what I need. But there are physical things I actually start with. It's not a colonic, but I do this system of body work called Rolfing. If you're familiar, Rolfing is, for those of you listening, Rolfing is, it's a body work that is meant to manipulate the fascia in the body. And traditionally it's a 10 set series where you kind of work through the body, and the whole intention is really to just find the most neutral body. And I find that incredibly helpful because we all sort of build up physical habits and patterns of movement or tension. And I find that when I'm really, really aware of where I'm currently holding tension or where I was as I'm leaving a project, that it just helps me understand what's going on in my life, like why is my neck and my shoulders so tight, or why are my hips really tight, why are my hamstrings tight? It's like you hold tension in different parts of the body, and I always find that when I'm leaving a character, that character's had a great impact on how I'm living, where I hold my tension, where I'm focusing physically in my body. So that's just like a really nice way for me to finish a project, exist in between projects, and to restart. When I was doing Saturday Night, one of the things that was really important for me was to find Chevy's voice, which his is, like right now I feel like really comfortable and loose, but sometimes I can get a little wound up. My voice gets a little tight and bright. And I can have like a lot of jaw tension and neck tension. And I worked with my rolfer on finding my like core voice and really opening up my core, losing a lot of tension in my stomach and in my chest and in my neck and my jaw, so that the sound that was coming out of me was far more resonant than it was beforehand. And I felt like my voice was sitting lower, because Chevy has this really resonant masculine voice that's really free. And so that was like imperative in the process for me early on of figuring out how to find this man. Because really the process, it generally, you know, if we like back out, the process for me is, how do I make this feel as real as possible for me? How can I convince myself that I believe what I'm doing? How do I feel connected to this character and these circumstances and this experience? And I don't necessarily mean that in a method sense, whatever that means to people as they're listening, but it's ridding myself of any feeling of fraudulence, so that when I'm living as this character and going to work every day, that I'm buying in to this so that everyone else can buy into this.
Yeah.
Especially when the work requires like a real emotional connection for that character. For it to feel really real is just really helpful for me. But this being a comedy, Saturday Night being a comedy, which this is my first comedy, the thing that was crazy early on, I read the script and I'm like, okay, I have all the pressures of doing a comedy for the first time, and I'm reading this, and I can sort of have like my instincts of how I would make something funny. Certain line readings or physically what I could do to emphasize humor in a certain place, and it just doesn't work. It's like, that's just not the task at hand. The task was to figure out, what are Chevy Chase's instincts? What would he do here? And the scary thing when I got this job was I just didn't know. Usually when you get a script and you take on a job or a role, you're like, you have instincts, or you can have an idea of like, oh, where that character meets you. But this just isn't that.
Yeah.
It's not Chevy meeting me.
Yeah.
It's me meeting Chevy as close as possible to him. So I got rid of the script very early in this process, because I knew that if I kept reading it, I would just continue to assign my instincts to every single line and scenario. So I was like, I cannot touch the script. And I had like 2 or 3 months, like about 3 months before we started shooting. And I just was like, I can't work on the script, which is usually where I start. So in this process, I started by just watching him constantly. And for about 2 months, I almost exclusively watched Chevy Chase. I grew to appreciate what he was doing so much more. And I watched a lot of interviews with him, especially some of his interviews with Dick Cavett, where he's really prickly, but he's so free, and he's constantly toying and playing, it's like watching a cat with a toy, but also showing off.
And when you're watching this stuff,
Yeah.
are you like a detective, like trying to find clues? I mean, is that a good analogy, or are you just a sponge, just letting all this come in and not dealing with it yet? Like,
for a while, it was just, I just need to watch.
Yeah.
It's kind of, for me, it's like listening to an album, and how many times you have to listen to a song before you start really
That's good. Yeah.
knowing the lyrics.
Yeah.
I know people that can just listen to a song and they kind of know the lyrics. I have to listen a lot.
Yeah.
And so I just watched him a lot.
Yeah.
And I found things that I wanted that I really latched onto. There was an interview early on where he said that Fletch was the thing that he felt closest to. So I was like, well, there we go. I watch Fletch.
Yeah.
And Fletch was on streaming while I was prepping. And so I just had that playing constantly, over and over and over. Even when I was doing other things, just had my like laptop around while I'm cooking or while I'm getting ready for like bed. And I would just have it playing so that I could pick up on his speech patterns and his tonality, and then physically I would watch him, how he was moving. He has all these like little bits in business, and some of them are really great. So I just started I made like a spreadsheet for the different movies I was watching, his little bits, what scene it was in, why, when he did it, what was going on, what he was saying. Was it preceding or proceeding a joke? Was it just busy business, like filling space? Was he avoiding something? It's like I just started analyzing after a while so that I could try to, so I could try to build motion and movement from him that seemed to feel familiar to people. If you know Chevy, to see what I'm doing and for it to sort of not even make sense why it feels so familiar.
Yeah.
That like the blinking happens after these kinds of jokes, or, when he's emphasizing something, when is he doing things with his hands, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And that for me, was how I got rid of the feeling of fraudulence. But that took so much time.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think that that's important. I think every actor has to do that, and they do that in different ways. I mean, like they may not even know they're doing it, but this is also partly what you're talking about, like with the method, that the quote unquote method, not the real method, the quote unquote method that people seem to like to talk about lately is a way of dealing with that some people consider a little toxic or unhealthy for other actors around the person. But every actor has to do this, because the first person they have to fool is themselves.
Right.
But what I really want to know, though, is when you're in the process of trying to remove this fraudulence, wasn't there also this kind of worry that you're taking in all this? There is a way that you have to process this where it doesn't become mimicry, which it wasn't in the movie. How did you do that part of it? And were you worried about that initially, that you're taking in too much of this and spreadsheets and making
No, because for a while I was just studying his work and mimicking his performances in his films. I was mimicking him because I felt like that was the best way for me to hear his tonality, hear his vowels, get his speech pattern down by just performing his own stuff while I'm alone in my apartment.
Yeah.
And then, much later, I go to my script for Saturday night, and because all I'm doing is watching him, and all I'm doing is, mimicking him in my apartment, it's about instinct. So I can read that script. None of these lines are lines that he's said, except for the parts where, we're redoing sketches, and then that actually should be kind of mimicry. But everything else is new. It's written by Jason and Gil, and so it's me just taking what I'm doing and putting what I think are Chevy's instincts on it, or what I think, as close as I can get to that. So that seemed like the clearest path for me.
Yeah.
And it's like that for me was intuitive, because no one told me to do that. That's just like, this just seems like the best possible road to accomplishing what I want to accomplish.
But it's interesting, because like instincts like that don't just come out of anywhere. I mean, that's what I want to talk about now, and we'll get back to Chevy. But I think that if you didn't have your theater background, this kind of instinct wouldn't come out.
Yeah, so I went to school called Otterbein University. When I went there, it was Otterbein College, and I went there and I studied drama for 4 years, and piano, and it was a great school for me. It's not one of the programs that people, it's like at the top of their list to go to. I was from Columbus, Ohio. I had auditioned for tons of schools, all different places, and I really wanted to leave Columbus because I grew up there. And I was like, get me away from my parents!
Yeah.
But this school gave me full tuition to go, and I wasn't raised with money, so that was really appealing. And the thing is, it ended up being the perfect space for me. I grew up in a very pleasant suburban household, and I was pretty green and fresh, and college was a place for me. It was a very safe suburban campus with a lot of people from the region, and it wasn't in a big city, and it wasn't around a bunch of people, who were raised with a lot of money and with a lot of culture, who had traveled the world. It was like a step forward for me where I was exposed to more, but I wasn't overwhelmed. And so it was a safe space for me to fall in love for the first time twice, and have my heart broken, and make some other big mistakes, and explore academics for me. I almost dropped my major a few times to move into philosophy and pre-law. You know, I was really confused at this time, but it was a place where I could fail and grow safely at like a right stage for me, and also having a really great program that was so small, where every day I spent 2 hours in an acting class, you know, exercising all of these crazy emotions I was going through as a young kid. And so that just was, it was perfect for me.
Were you working on these instincts even before you went to school, and then that was just, they laid this kind of training on top of it, or is in school where some of these instincts actually came?
I'm going to keep with the theme that I sort of set up at the top, where there's like an intuitive path and a practical path. Going to school to study acting and drama was an intuitive path for me. It was not practical. It's actually not, it was never the plan or the goal. That was very late in high school where I decided to audition for schools. I had two other competing career paths. One was a lawyer. My mom had worked in a medical malpractice law firm, and I was obsessed with some of these lawyers that she worked with. And there's something really performative about that, being a trial attorney, that was really appealing to me. And the other path was to be a concert pianist. And I loved piano. It was my first love. Music is very important to me in my life, but also as an actor. And I thought I wanted to be a pianist, and I went and visited some schools, and a couple things happened. One, I realized that, you know, I started playing really young, but I didn't go through like a competition circuit, and I was like way behind. And there was this whole other world of teenagers like competing with piano that my family just didn't know to put me through or put me in. And so I wasn't competitive in that way. And so it was really like, well, I can't be a concert pianist. I could like go and be a musician, but not that lane. Like that's not for me. And then I just, honestly, I met some people where I was like, I don't know if this is my community, you know? I'm like, I think I need to be in a collaborative art form. So I really was like very unsure in high school, and I was always doing theater growing up. And I had this amazing drama teacher, Gail Griffith, who had built this unbelievably robust theater program at my high school that is now dismantled because of budget cuts. It's a tragedy. But I was very lucky that I went there when she had built this program that had 4 levels of acting classes and a directing class and a writing class. We had 2 performance stages. She was doing 6 productions a year at a high school. This amazing program, and I took it for granted, but you know, it was a great space for me. I had a lot of friends that did this. It was a wonderful place to like be expressive and grow, and you know, I was like a creative person, and I really made time to like go through her program. But it wasn't until I was like, oh, music is not the path for me, and I don't know that I want to be a lawyer, that I had done a play where I played 6 different roles, and it was the first time where it was like, it was beyond just having a good time and, you know, having, you know, and enjoying the expression, where I was like, oh wow, I actually have some gift to craft character and move between them, and the audience really responding to each one of them.
Right.
And that was really awakening to me, where I was like, oh wait, I think what I possess is, you know, there's something here. And Gail really was really like supportive in helping me prepare for auditions and encouraging me to go to school. And so I did. And then I was in school and I was there, and the reason I was like almost changing degrees every now and then is because practically I was like, I don't understand this path. I'm here. I like this. There's something that feels really beautiful about just living through the human condition. But practically I'm like, this doesn't feel like a real career. I don't understand how I make a living out of this. So many people can't. And I don't know what to do, you know, future casting myself, where I get down a lane and suddenly I can't do this, or I'm not having luck with this. I don't know how long I can sort of survive on the dream of being an actor, because I didn't necessarily have this like long dream of being a successful actor, I was interested in the experience of doing it. There is something mystical about this exercise where I feel most alive when I'm doing this work, and it's addicting.
Yeah.
It's like holy drugs, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sober, but I'm connected to something else. And so that was like the struggle for me of choosing something practical, maybe going into like law or continuing down this intuitive path. And I have just, every time I've thought about leaving, something else happens to me that keeps me here.
What do you account that to?
I don't know.
That's the right
Is
answer.
the answer. I don't know, but it's like
even if you're not spiritual or mystical or anything, there has to be this kind of understanding that if you're doing what your heart wants to do, that like things open up.
Things open up and I open up. I feel I love this work, and I think a lot of other actors or any artist listening to this will understand when you're doing it and you feel connected not only to a story and a character, but also like your body's open. You are really hearing another person. You're connecting with another person through a made up scenario, but you feel genuinely connected to them.
Yeah.
It's a strange, wonderful exercise of life.
You seem like somebody who enjoys the variety of characters that you get to play, right?
I do.
When you land something that is like the dream of people, like a role on a TV show, in this case it's a very exciting role on Gotham, but was there also part of you like, well, how long, wait, I want to do other things though, how long is this going to last?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the pursuit of work is different for everybody. The way they pursue or choose what they want to pursue. Some people, it's just you go out for anything and everything to get jobs. I chose some representatives of mine, these two guys that manage me, and we try to curate work. I'm pretty intentional about what I pursue, what I audition for, and the jobs that I say yes to. And what that's meant a lot of times is I try to go out for a lot of things that are very competitive, and sometimes they don't happen, and I say no to a lot of other things in the meantime. Gotham was a really particular thing because it wasn't labeled as Batman at the time that I auditioned, but I learned through the process what it was, and who the character was, and sort of the way that the series would be built, which is really, Batman as a child, starting when his parents die, centering Jim Gordon as the police detective trying to solve this crime, meanwhile meeting all of these would-be villains, soon-to-be villains, and telling their origin stories. It was a cool premise to me, but the crazy thing was they would not give us a script. So I'm auditioning for this thing with great creators, Bruno Heller, who had made Rome, and Danny Cannon, who was the director and executive producer, and he had crafted the look of CSI, which really revolutionized a lot of shows like that. So there were some really interesting creatives on the team, but there was no script. And for me, I'm like, I don't know if I want to do something unless I read the script, because I want to know that I connect with a character.
Yeah.
There's really nothing worse for me than trying to make something work that I don't feel connected to. It's a nightmare. It just doesn't work. It's a painful process. So this was like a huge risk, because I was like, I don't really know what I'm getting into. They're not sharing the scripts. I don't know what the arc of this character is. So I signed a 7-year contract when I got hired, rolling the dice, because at that point, I had made a transition from theater to TV and film, and I'd only really been doing TV and film for, at the time I got that my first movie I filmed in August 2013, and this I booked in February 2014. And I was broke.
Yeah.
And a huge reason I went out to LA during this pilot season, and I said in my reps, I was like, I have no money. I'm doing really cool things, but I have no money. I would like to get a TV show. That was like an objective, like a practical objective. And there was another TV show that was offered to me, and I said no to it. And then
wait, even with like rent.
Let me tell you
due.
that I was on the phone with my agents and my managers, and my agents were excited about it, obviously, and my managers were less enthusiastic. And I have trusted my managers. I chose to trust my managers implicitly. I have to this day. It's been 12 years, and I said no, and it was so much money for me. I remember being on the phone and saying to them, I said, I am going to take your advice here. I was like, but this is exactly what I've been trying to accomplish, and I'm going to hang up, I'm going to go throw up, and we're going to move forward, and something else is going to come up. And it was, I think, 2 weeks later that Gotham was offered to me, and I ended up saying yes to that, even though there was a lot of mystery around it because there was no script. But I was like, it's Batman. It's the Riddler. There haven't been many people who have taken on this role. And it's a cool world. I like the creatives involved, but it was a big risk. And I signed a 7-year contract. Luckily, it was filming in New York, which is where I lived. So I got to stay home and do this. But it was filming 9 to 10 months a year for what ended up being 5 years. And the first season, I wasn't used that much, but I was being paid money that I had never seen or had before. And it was this wild thing of feeling creatively unfulfilled because I had not a lot to do, but financially, so much of my debt burdens from room and board of college and paying to take extra classes in college. I didn't have a ton of debt, but I had a little bit of debt there. I had medical debt from an accident from when I had first moved to New York City, that I was, it's like I was paying off this debt that really freed my spirit up.
That's the thing.
But the creative reality of that first season was it was really frustrating because I just wasn't being utilized much.
But were you at least picking up on like, okay, this is a TV set, this is interesting?
I was learning
that
a ton. It was like, there are highs and lows of all these things. I was learning a ton. I was so grateful to have this job. I was paying off debts. I moved into a studio apartment. I was living alone for the first time in New York City. That felt like a huge accomplishment. But creatively, it was frustrating until I had conversations with the showrunner, Bruno Heller, about what the plan was. That first season, they kept writing sort of the same scene for me over and over and over and over. And I was like, what's going on? Like, what's the path here? And I remember, I think it was around like episode 13 or 14 of 22 that I had a meeting with Bruno, and I was like...
Did you ask for the meeting?
I asked for the meeting.
Interesting,
and I was like, what's the plan?
What's
the plan? Where are we going? Why do I have the same scene over and over? And is there something I can do to help?
That's pretty audacious, right? I mean, at that time for you, first time in television.
It seemed like there was a problem to be solved because I just was unclear what was going on. I was like, I feel like there's not a lot of forward momentum here. And I sat down with Bruno, and Bruno was very honest with me about what he needed to see from my performance to move forward. And for me, I was like, oh wow, I don't know why we didn't have this conversation earlier. But he told me what I needed to shift in my performance to move forward. So I was like, I can do those things, but you have to make something happen to me for me to change. And that's when storylines were created to help
So
me
interesting.
adjust
Yeah.
who I was and
Yeah.
how I was behaving to move forward. And then we unlocked something, and they quickly, discovered that when they throw things at me, I really will catch the ball and do something. And it turned into a 5-year relationship where I think I had one of the best story arcs in the whole series. One of the most dynamic and interesting, and it became really fun because they would, as a challenge, like hand me something really
If you could do that, let's
wild.
see if you could do this.
Yeah, it became a really fun, like, collaboration
Yeah.
of like.
So you were becoming creatively fulfilled then.
Yeah, because I think in my opinion, respectfully said, "What's going on and how can I help?"
Yeah, that needed to happen.
And I learned a lesson there about communication. And understanding that like sometimes no one even is necessarily recognizing that there's a problem to be solved.
Exactly.
And on that show in particular, it's a big ensemble. And I learned during that, how to be a team player and to really collaborate and to make everyone else's job easier by showing up and offering solutions.
Yes.
So when we get to something like Saturday Night, which is another huge ensemble, I was a real player.
Yeah.
Like with Jason, I showed up with a lot of ideas. I had like conferences with him leading up to it where I was proposing all kinds of ideas and different lines and jokes and like props, set decorations that I could use at certain times that like could harken to a performance or a moment in this movie or that sketch, as like Easter eggs.
How was
for
his
him.
reception of this?
Jason was amazing. Jason loves he loves collaborators. He loves people showing up with ideas. He's usually game. There was a day, it was actually almost every day I would show up and I'd be like, I have an idea, that morning, and I'd propose it to him or like a line change or an added thing, and he almost always said yes. And if he said no, he was right. There was always a reason, but I've learned over the years that if you show up with a basket full of ideas, it's almost always rewarded. And if it's not rewarded by someone, then that's a whole other issue that would have to do with that person. But I just haven't worked with those.
Interesting.
With anyone that isn't okay with that.
Yeah.
But like there's the second scene where you meet Chevy. He's talking to a bunch of affiliates from around the country, and the way that it was scripted, there are 2 jokes. He had written a couple jokes and like a physical bit. And then later in that scene, Willem Dafoe's character, who's an NBC executive who takes care of The Tonight Show, pulls him aside and says, basically, you're the next Johnny Carson. And I'd said to Jason, I was like, I don't know how to earn that with 2 jokes and a physical bit.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is like an intuitive thing for me again. I'm like, also just sort of practical story-wise, but I was like,
That's right.
There has to be more.
Yeah.
And I really pressed him on that. I was like, I'm not just asking you to write me more. I really think.
Yeah, it's not a selfish ask.
Yeah,
It's
I don't think I can earn that line, and it's very important for his story arc to really earn that.
Yeah.
We need to see him a little bit more in that room. And so the week leading up to that, at this point I was like really improvising as Chevy a lot and like writing jokes, but that week leading up to it, I was writing jokes, a lot of Chevy jokes, period appropriate jokes. And I showed up that morning and I was like, hey, I have some extra material. Do you want me to run it by you? Do you want to read them? Do you want me to show them to you? And he was like, look, I just need you to say the first part because it's how the camera pans to you. It's how we find you. He was like, and then you can do whatever the fuck you want. And I was like, okay. So the cameras are set up. We've sort of done a camera rehearsal. And then they bring in all the affiliates. I don't know how many people were in the room, 20, 30, 40 people maybe, in this little room. Everyone's smoking, drinking, eating food. And get up on that stage and the cameras are rolling and I just rattle off all of these stand-up jokes that I wrote. And I went through a lot of them, and then we cut, and Jason came in and gave me a big thumbs up and said, let's do it again. And then I just was looking around the room and I'm seeing all these affiliates and they're dressed certain ways, they're wearing different hats. And I just started coming up with jokes.
Adjusted it right there.
Yeah, and I've never done this, but I was like, this is like what's so beautiful about like a director giving you room, empowering you, and you doing the work, and like things are flowing and there's room to fail. It's like he's gonna edit this, so some of these jokes aren't gonna work because they're not funny, they're not landing, they're too far, they're not, they're not right. But I just was like, I'm gonna shower you with options, and then you can cut and put it together, and that's exactly what happened. But that was like one of my favorite days because I felt like that was a real example of, me in my power showing up and being a good collaborator with ideas, and someone else receiving that and being like, I see what you're saying and you're right. Yeah. And in the final cut, we see like multiple jokes by him, and it really makes sense at the end when he gets pulled aside.
There you go.
By Willem. Like it tracks.
Is it this particular role where you felt that need to be like that, or is this kind of need to be exercising those muscles always with you?
Always, actually. I've done 3 films with Todd Haynes.
Yeah.
The first movie I did with Todd was Carol, and I filmed Carol the same time I was filming the first episode of Gotham.
Oh, wow.
And I had just shot a miniseries called Olive Kittredge. It was my second project on camera, and I felt really great about the work that I did. It was extremely difficult and emotional, and I really handled it. It was scary for me because I'd never had to do that on camera before, and I figured it out really like on the job, but I felt aware of like my capacity and my ability to do this in a way that I was like, my confidence really skyrocketed from being able to do that. And the casting director of Olive Kittredge, Laura Rosenthal, casts Todd Haynes' films, and so she immediately called me in for Carol. I was the first person that read for this role. And Todd hired me off of this tape of doing one scene, and because she really vouched for me, knowing how I was on set and how I worked with the director of Olive Kittredge, Lisa Cholodenko. And so Todd hired me off this one scene, and we had a meeting afterward, and Todd notoriously makes these stunning visual books, these Bibles, these visual Bibles for every film that he's going to do. And I sat down in Laura Rosenthal's office on a later date, and he took me through and showed me all of these images from films and that are inspiring this film, and that was really helpful. And he was having conversations with me down to like, where do you think the part in his hair would be? Wow. Or like, what kind of glasses do you think he would wear? Right? Yeah, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, and how nice to be included so early on in all of these sort of decisions. He just wanted to, I think he was both like inviting me, like teaching me the level of specificity that he's interested in, and saying, this is all, you have authority over this as well. I want to hear your ideas, and like training me and welcoming me to really show up in that way with specificity. So I learned from him early on. I was like, oh wow, I'm empowered to do this, and that's really great. And when I showed up, there were 3 scenes that we filmed. One of them is cut from the movie because it sort of gave away the secret of why this character is important. But the first scene that's in the film was the audition scene. And he sort of, I made him like really sort of goofy and likable and a little like esoteric and annoying. And that's why Todd hired me. And then we did the second scene, which he had never seen me do. And I showed up, and it was like I'm playing a completely different character, because he's revealed as being this investigator, this private investigator that's stalking them. And she pulls a gun on him. And I'm like, I don't think he should flinch. And I think he should be like a hard ass probably from the military, knows exactly how to handle this situation. And so it's almost an entirely different character. And I presented that to Todd, and he was like, I did not even consider this or think that this is how this character would be played. And because of that, I think is why he invited me onto 2 more movies, because I really showed up with a very clear, specific choice and reasoning. And so when May December came up, which was of the 3 movies, like the coolest role he's given me, he was like, I've never seen you do a performance like this, and I would like to, which is the most amazing thing that a director can possibly say to you, to give you the confidence and authority to really show up and surprise them. And on that one, we had a lot of conversations about really physically making an alteration to me and crafting a completely different physical look. The thing that was weird about that one, though, that job, I don't know why I wasn't forthright in communicating this with him, but it takes place in Savannah, and his parents, Julianne's character and his father, are not originally from Savannah in the script, but he was raised in Savannah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, really, like, of all the characters you're going to spend time with, no one is really going to have like a Savannah accent.
Yeah.
But my character was 36 and was raised in Savannah and is sort of a townie and a musician there. And so I hired personally a dialect coach to work with me to learn a Savannah dialect and then to learn how to turn it down really, really low so that it was very subtle.
Yeah.
And I remember I showed up to my first day of work, and I did not talk to him about this. And I really don't actually know why. Because we spent so much time talking about the detail of the physicality and the look of him. And there was a lot of time spent on finding just the perfect costume for him.
And the tattoos you did.
And the tattoos that I designed, all those tattoos, which was really fun part of the process. And the makeup artists it was just really fun because we got to like really talk about what they would be and why, and then mapped them out over my body. That was just a really fun sort of sport with them. But I showed up on the first day and we're shooting, and Todd was like, we didn't talk about a dialect. He was like, I think he should kind of have a dialect. And I was like, Todd, I'm really glad that you're saying this because I've been working with a dialect coach. He was like, are you serious? Wow. And I was like, yeah. I was like, there's a very specific Savannah dialect. And I presented it to him, and I was like, you can like turn this up or down on me, but I was like, this is what it is. And he was, it was like those things where we just sort of like find each other and meet each other, which is really, really nice.
That's amazing. So I was at the New York Film Festival press screening of that film. It gets over, and the first thing I'm doing before I even leave, I'm typing into my phone, C-O-R. I'd never seen you before. I swear to God, bro. I'm like, who is this guy?
Oh, that's nice.
I swear to you. Now, I was seeing, and I just looked at it again this morning, I was seeing you, and I don't want you to think that this is anything disparaging to the other actors. It's not. But you made those people better in the scenes.
I would say it is the task of a supporting actor to make the other actors better. I do think that's actually the job.
Yes.
And I actually love, of course I'd love to like lead a film. And I've done that once. And I hope to do that more because what an incredible task and responsibility to like lead a story. But playing a supporting role that's really written well, which this was by Sammy Birch, is a real thrill because the challenge becomes reading the other roles and understanding how to best serve their arc. And by serving them really means to challenge them. How do you create a roadblock for them that they have to get around? And this was so well written. You only see him a couple times, but he creates a real problem for Natalie Portman's character. And he should be both sort of like alluring and sort of intoxicating, but also dangerous
Yep.
and a really good liar. That was the job. And
Yes.
I was like, oh, I can do this. Like,
Yeah.
I know how to come in and do this. And I remember I had written an email to Todd about that first scene where you meet him, which is in the Crab Shack, where he's, performing. He's performing these songs, which I helped arrange and choose the key of
nice.
and record with the band ahead of time.
Oh my God.
I was like, Todd, I will take care of the music. Like, I am a musician.
That's
I've studied piano.
hilarious.
I can I was like, I will figure this out with the band,
Yeah.
which was great. But I wrote him this email where I was like, I have questions about what's going to be on the table, how the table is going to be set up. I was like, because I really need to understand the territory.
Yeah.
Because my job here is to like really invade her space.
Yeah.
To
like
make
drinking
her
her
uncomfortable.
drink.
Yeah. So it was very much, I was like, I need to know who has drinks, if there's food, is there a caddy with like salt, pepper, sugar packets? Like, what the fuck is going to be on the table? Because I just need to know, I want to know ahead of time so that I can design some options to show him that aren't too distracting, but are upsetting to her or bothersome or uncomfortable, whether that's whatever it could have been. I had like a list of options basically.
Yeah.
And he was like, I know what you're asking. And he like got back to me and he told me all this stuff so that I could sort of like prepare this. But a lot of it was, like if I can just take her water.
Yeah.
Just to
It's subtle,
invade
though.
her
You're right.
territory.
And it's not like a thing where like I didn't even notice it really until this time that I watched it, that you actually take her water. But I felt it the first time, I think.
But he
You know
also
what I mean?
doesn't just take her water. There's food.
He's eating food.
There's food on the table that he eats and is sort of talking with his mouth full, but it's dry cornbread, right? So I was like, having food that makes my mouth dry so that I need water.
Need it, yeah.
And she's the only one that has it.
Yeah.
But I need it, so I'm just gonna take it. So it's not like I'm just doing it to fuck with her. It's I need that and it's hers, and that's really upsetting and bothersome.
Yeah.
So it's just like creating scenarios such that I can fuck with her in a productive way for her.
Yeah, yeah. What were you seeing from her with this? Because what I'm telling you is real. I'm seeing somebody coming to play with you.
She was great. She was amazing. She really showed up.
Yeah.
To play, and there were different takes. I was always sort of dancing around the same thing for her.
Yeah.
But she's trying to learn about a family, and I should, the task was like, I need to give her enough information where thinks she's getting answers and give it to her in a way that's like really very interesting. Mm-hmm. But for him, it doesn't have to be true. He's a performer.
Yeah.
He's a musician. He's performing in a crab shack.
Yeah.
Like he's a performer. He wants attention. So he's allowed to lie and sort of be a little dramatic about it.
Yeah. And it's funny that you're saying like you were never in a comedy. I was laughing so hard this morning. I was annoying my wife. I mean, like it's so funny. You're so funny
role, yeah.
Every moment of that
it's
is
a funny
funny
role.
And it's coming out of though real things. You know what I mean? Like that's why you're good at comedy, because you're making stuff funny that's just organic there. It's not like you're trying to be funny.
Yeah. Sammy Birch wrote great scenes that are tense and uncomfortable, and that's there's great comedy in that.
Yeah. Going back to Chevy, you said that you needed to find the vulnerability in him, and you found something, and that's why I'm saying like, is this detective work? Because you actually found something that led you into that, right?
Yeah.
And this was him on the first time he was on Carson,
right.
I think, right?
Yeah.
First of all, why do you need to find that in reality? If this is a character, even though it's a real person, and you know that even though he is confident, that of course he's vulnerable, why not just add it, right? Add it in your own way. you needed to find him
I wanted to
presenting that to you.
I wanted to see what Chevy does when he's humiliated. I know what I could do when I'm humiliated, or I can design someone else's humiliation, but I wanted to see what Chevy looked like humiliated. And in the kinds of comedies he was doing in the 80s and 90s, when you see humiliation on there, I think by and large there's a little bit of a performance to it. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not super real. And I think vulnerability was really important because when we think of Chevy Chase, we think of a wildly confident, charismatic man who always seems in control. He's kind of faster and funnier than almost anyone he's talking to. He's taller than them. So he just has he like sort of lords over people. Mm-hmm. Watching him with Dick Cavett is wild because he's just funnier and faster, and Dick Cavett is really earnest and genuine, and it doesn't work with Chevy. Chevy just like tosses him about. So, you know, it's like, but the thing is that this is Chevy before the world met him. So he has all of this confidence. He is really fast, but he only knows this from the people he's interacted with. He's not a superstar. So the level of validation that he has is only in daily life. He isn't beloved. He isn't a superstar. So he's not validated enough that when Milton Berle, the king of television, smacks him down, that he capitulates. Mm-hmm. He can be confident, but he actually hasn't been successful on a TV show. So when the most successful man on television says, "Who the fuck are you, kid?" You're nothing. Yeah. You've accomplished nothing. It's actually true.
Yeah.
And so that hurts. If you said that to Chevy in 1985, Chevy would have plenty to come back on and because that wouldn't be a true statement.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like, it's really interesting how thin confidence can be when you don't have a lot to stand on. The first time he's on Johnny Carson, he comes out, the audience is so excited. Oh my God, Chevy Chase. We love Chevy Chase. And he sits down and the interview's getting started. It's very early on and Johnny goes, "So your special's on tomorrow night?" Chevy goes, "I do." In silence, because it makes no fucking sense. And Johnny laughs in his face. And the studio audience laughs at Chevy Chase, Chevy Chase. And he sort of, you know, like shakes his head and his body and Johnny says something like, "I know you're new to this, so let me tell you how this is gonna work.
Whoa.
I'm gonna ask you questions.
Whoa.
And it'd be great if you could give an answer to that question."
Wow.
And it's even worse when you know sort of the history of Johnny Carson and SNL, how contentious it was. And so, you know, Chevy knows that he's kind of going up against someone who is maybe a little threatened by him or doesn't like him or doesn't really actually think he's funny, doesn't deserve this, is a little too big for his britches. And so it's slightly volatile. It's like quiet, but it's a little volatile. And you see a humiliated Chevy try to recover from that. And that was that's what I had to work with. But it was enough to understand in the J.K. Simmons scene what that would look like and feel like.
Yeah. Getting to realize now how you like to work.
Yeah.
Realizing also, like I have been since that moment when I was putting your name into the phone and becoming a fan of yours, you know, that there is results to this that are special.
Yeah.
Todd Haynes would be idiotic if he's not writing a starring role for you right now. Let me just say that on the record.
Can you call him? I'm not gonna ask.
I'm sure he's
for it.
somewhere doing that. I mean, come on. But anyway, from what you're saying, like even we go back to you telling your team, hey, let's curate this. This is a long game here.
Yeah.
Where are you now in that? Like, and knowing that you need to be creative like this for this stuff to come alive, are you thinking about actually developing your own material, and then that being something that actually where it all comes together for you.
Yes. I bought the rights to a novel a few years ago, and I have been adapting that. I have a pilot that I've written. The thing is, I'm sort of sitting on these things still. And one of them is like not even really for me. It's not a vehicle for me. It's just a story that I felt like I needed to write. I do see myself doing other things, but I love being an actor, and that's like where my focus is right now. The thing that I want to do, though, is just work with really great artists. I just did a small supporting role in Joachim Trier's new film.
Oh, cool.
Which for now is called Sentimental Values. I think it's a working title, but with Renata, his longtime collaborator, and Stellan Skarsgård.
She's been on the show. She's been
Elle
on the
Fanning.
show.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
I haven't listened to that episode.
Yeah.
She's so good.
Amazing.
She's so good. But you know, that was like, it's not a big role, but he's one of my favorite filmmakers, and I wanted to like invest in the bank of Joachim Trier. I think it was such a joy to watch him work. He created a completely different environment and shooting schedule than other directors I've been able to work with, and I learned a lot from him.
Can you just say something about that? What was that?
Yeah, this is his 6th film, and he's figured out how to, sell films in territories prior to shooting and getting funding, and then using that funding in a way where he can have a long shooting schedule.
That's amazing.
So it's an independent film with 65 shooting days.
That's amazing.
So he really has time to work with everyone and develop ideas and
that's amazing.
really satisfy himself as a creator and the people he's working with. And it felt really luxurious and nice. And I'm really sort of inspired by that model and the way that he wanted to work. And there's certain people where I'm like, I will do whatever to watch you work or to be a part of your film. I felt that way about Todd Haynes. The second role he had offered me was really small. I would work with Jason Reitman again in a second. But I feel that way about most people I've worked with. And then ideally I'm hopeful that there are directors out there who want to collaborate on putting me center of a story. I've only done that once. It was a movie called 1985 with a writer-director named Yen Tan, who really took a chance on me and let me lead his film, and I'm really proud of what we made, and I had such a spectacular time working with him. But it was like a really unique challenge to lead a company of great actors and build something. That actually was a really unique prep experience as well, because 1985, I read that script and I had an overwhelming visceral emotional response to reading it. And I was so keyed in emotionally that I didn't want to keep reading the script because I was afraid that the intensity of my emotional connection to those scenes would dissipate if I worked on it too much. I've never had that I had that experience before, but the circumstances were so heartbreaking. I was so captured by it and the crisis of that character that I was like, I cannot keep reading the script. And so I think I was cast 4 months before we shot, and it was like, I think it was just like every 2 to 3 weeks I would read the script. And otherwise I would stay away from it.
Because you wanted to keep this kind of, stay in this zone with it. Right? And if you read it too much, it would kind of sink down.
It was the least I've ever prepared for a film.
Interesting.
And I told Yen that ahead of time. I was like, there were certain scenes where I could really sort of memorize the words, but some of the scenes I just couldn't do it too far in advance. And I remember having a meeting with him on FaceTime or on the phone ahead of time. And he was like, let's just go through the script. And I told him, I said, look, I have an extremely specific experience of reading this script. I was like, I can tell you exactly what word I will fall apart on in every scene. I was like, I was like, so we can go through the script. I was like, I'm going to tell you what idea destroys me, and you can tell me whether you want that to happen or not. I can stifle something. I can move it to a different word. It was actually amazing, because I was like, I know that I can do this for you. I was like, you can design this however you want as a director, and I can facilitate that, because I am so attached to this character and his crisis and the way that he wrote this. It was really unbelievable. It was like one of the most magical connections of words to director to actor that I've ever had.
That's amazing. What about the theater? Is there still an urge to do that? I know that doesn't pay bills. Is part of your heart there, though?
Sure. I mean, I started in the theater. I love the theater. There are so many great New York theater actors that I love and admire, and I go and see. I've really enjoyed working on camera, though.
Yeah.
And I haven't been back on the stage. I did a brief thing in 2017, but my last show was in 2013. I had my Broadway debut of a show that did not go very well. And I haven't been back on stage since. And I would go back, but for the right thing with the right people. And there have been a couple like close calls of me possibly going back, but it just hasn't happened. I would for the right thing. But the thing is, I really love working on camera because every day is a different project. It's a different task.
Yeah.
There's a new scene, and I like that. I like having a new challenge, constantly figuring out how to solve something. I didn't know that I would love that so much, and I think I would struggle with a long run in the theater, because I actually don't do this work necessarily for like an attachment to an immediate audience. I don't need feedback. I don't need to be celebrated or applauded. And there's an energy exchange that's certainly interesting, but what I really like is the work of it, the puzzle of it, doing the research, studying, preparing, communicating, problem solving, searching for something, finding it, moving on to the next thing. It feels active in a way that really satisfies me. And also there's, when you're in theater in space, you really have to be aware of the space and of the people, and you are performing something. You need to perform something so that everyone in that space is receiving what you're doing. And so you're calibrating, you have to calibrate to the space. And that is a completely different task. And I do really like the challenge of just existing in space with the people that are immediately there and allowing another artist to capture that in a way that feels exciting and unique, and deeply personal. I like that exchange a lot. I like working with artists that have cameras that can sort of, choose a perspective for an audience. Not that it's like one space with a lighting designer sort of choosing the perspective of an audience. That's just where I am right now, And that's not that I wouldn't go back to the theater, but I feel like I'm learning so much about this medium still. And I grew up and started in the theater, and I've always felt like I understand that medium better. And this, I'm really addicted to still learning. So I'm really happy where I am.
Cory Michael Smith, we need you. And I want you to hear that. And I'm saying we. And I'm talking about the world and the audience at large. And I need you to come back on the show. Please.
I would come back on your show. This has been a pleasure to to speak with you.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.